figure that is taken from a BCG study that shows the number of actors and documents that are involved in a trade finance transaction. And I think the figure speaks for itself. Many different actors being involved, many documents. Now, that study showed as well that there were 5,000 data fields interaction generated, but only 1% created value. Now, blockchain, in my view, opens huge opportunities. It opens huge opportunities. Why? Because it allows all actors to interact on a peer-to-peer basis in real time in a highly secure environment. And so I do believe that it's a technology that can truly remove frictions from international trade. And so it's no surprise that many companies are looking into this technology in the trade finance and trade field, transportation, logistics field. Next slide, please. Yes. So many companies are looking into the technology. Many platforms have emerged, and we've tried to map these some of the key platforms in the trade finance and transportation and logistics field with the ICC and TradeFinex Global, and map them into a periodic table. Now, this table is not comprehensive. There are some other projects out there, and it's a fast-changing environment, so it has been overtaken by event to some extent. But what is interesting is to see the number of projects out there. And the problem we have is that these different projects do not talk to each other, only to a limited extent. So we have built a number of mini ecosystems, but what we actually need to do is to build an internet of mini ecosystems. And so we need to find a way to make these different platforms talk to each other. So there are a number of key challenges that need to be addressed. Next slide, please. The key challenge, in my view, is interoperability. I know it has been mentioned by several other speakers previously. Now, interoperability it's a catch-all term. It can be interoperability at a technical level. How do platforms built on different technologies, using different consensus protocols, using different ways of storing data, how do they interact with each other? But very important is, in my view, the level of business. How does interoperability work in terms of semantics? Do we speak the same language? Is the port of discharge the same thing as the port of unloading, for example? What about data models? You saw on the first chart that I showed the number of documents that were involved. Now, actually, if you look at the format of these documents, there are about 80 data elements that you find throughout these documents. But right now, traders have to enter the same information not only once, not only twice, sometimes it's 20 times. So there's a lot of rationalization work that needs to happen for blockchain to be truly transformative. In terms of business processes as well, KYC, for example. So we need standardization, we need standards, but we need them at a cross-sector level. The second challenge that we need to address, in my view, is related to regulation. Now, I know that regulation can be a toxic word for some tech people, but actually regulation is important. It can be an enabler. You can have a great digital technology, but if your legislation does not recognize e-signatures and e-documents, you won't be able to go very far. So recognition of e-signatures, e-documents is critical, but for the time being, only few countries actually allow for that in the legislation or in practice, because sometimes you have it in the legislation, but the practice doesn't follow. So there's still a very long way to go in that respect. Regulatory challenges, such as the status of smart contracts, recognition of blockchain transactions, questions related to data privacy, all these issues have to be addressed if we want blockchain to have a truly transformative impact. The risk that we are facing right now, I think, is a risk of regulatory fragmentation. And for that, we need to work together. We need to collaborate. We need some sort of governance at a cross-sector level, at a global level. So interoperability and collaboration are essential. Now, even more than ever. Next slide, please. Why? Because with the current crisis, trade barriers are on the rise, and I can tell you that we are flooded with new notifications from member states on new measures being taken. Now, when I say measures, very often they are trade barriers. Supply chains are being disrupted. Small businesses are hit head-on. Besides my work on blockchain, I lead work on SMEs at the WTO, and I can tell you that the situation is very dramatic right now. And the current crisis actually exacerbates very known existing challenges like access to trade finance, cumbersome border procedures. But if trade digitalization was a reality, it would go a long way in addressing the challenges that these small businesses are facing. Now, our trade facilitation team has been conducting a survey in cooperation with the ICC on what trade-related processes have become more cumbersome in the context of the current crisis, and you can see it on the screen here. Now, import-export controls, of course, but also documentary requirements and border agency cooperation and coordination, top concerns, and the processes that have become more cumbersome in the current crisis. Now, this is where blockchain can actually help when we talk about documentary requirements, agency coordination. So I think the current crisis is actually an opportunity to accelerate trade digitalization and to think about how technology can help us build more resilience to future shocks. But for true trade digitalization to actually happen, it requires interoperability and cooperation. So what I hope is that we're not going to waste the current crisis, but we'll seize this opportunity to work on trade digitalization, to ensure that interoperability at the level, not only at the technical level, but also at the level of business becomes a reality, and that we work together to create a truly enabling environment. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm not sure there was the video on. I couldn't see myself on the screen, but I hope you could see myself. You could see me.
You were on beautiful.
I was on. Okay. I just had black